Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Hutchins, co-founder and chief product officer here at Unearth. And on behalf of the entire Unearth team, welcome to today's panel. This is part of an ongoing series of events we're hosting to dive into the issues that matter in utilities, tech, and society. We have a great session in store today on a topic that's very near and dear to my heart as a female in technology. Today, we welcome 4 accomplished women in utilities in the built world and invite them to tell us about their unique experiences in the industry. So let's kick off our panel. I'm going to start by introducing everyone. So I'll start with Tricia Elizondo, the owner and CEO of Energy Renewal Partners. Tricia has over 20 years of experience in executing and managing complex environmental compliance, remediation, and demolition projects. She's managed large-scale, multi-million-dollar environmental projects in some of the most challenging technical and regulatory contexts. She uses her attention to detail and collaborative style to work with clients and regulators alike on permitting and planning projects associated with power plant development and construction, transmission line planning, and environmental remediation. Welcome, Tricia. Next, I'd like to introduce Becky Motal, the president of the Association of Women in Energy, where she's been serving in capacity for the past 7 years. As president, Becky has refocused AWE on its mission to assist women in the broad energy industry. During her continued leadership, she has grown the organization with various corporate sponsors and memberships as well. Prior to being elected AWE's president, Mrs. Motal was the first ever female general manager for the Lower Colorado River Authority, which provides water and electricity to more than 1 million Central Texans. As a result of her leadership, LCRA was able to reduce rates, remain competitive in the Texas energy market, and increase its customer base, all while dealing with record-breaking drought conditions, devastating wildfires, settlement of a water sharing contract lawsuit, and a massive streamlining reorg of the organization structure and operations. Welcome, Becky. We also have Robin Rosen, the Senior Program Manager at Southern Company Gas, joining us today. Robin is a licensed professional engineer and certified project management professional with more than 30 years of experience in various civil engineering disciplines focused primarily on water, sewer, and stormwater condition assessments and rehabilitation. She received her degree in civil engineering from the University of Virginia. After many years as an engineer consultant for water and sewer utilities across the southeastern United States, she joined Southern Company Gas in 2015 as their legacy cross-bore program manager. She has served a pivotal role in enforcing and documenting cross-bore detection and prevention requirements. Robin serves as the sewer and cross-bore subject matter expert for the entire Southern Company Gas enterprise across 4 states and multiple departments. She is currently the vice chair of Rebecca's Tent Homeless Shelter for Women in Atlanta. A wife and mother of 2 young adults, she lives in Atlanta. Welcome, Robin. And to round out our star panel, we have Sherry Warren, an innovation strategist with a deep and extensive career in the utility industry. Sherry's career has been one of service and operational excellence. She served in senior leadership at National Grid and held various positions, including Senior Vice President, Network Strategy for Gas and Electric, Vice President of Electric Network Strategy, Vice President of Smart Grid, Chief of Staff to the CEO, and most recently, Innovation Strategist for the company. Through her leadership of a $3 billion organization with 900 employees, she created a deep bench from top to bottom, began a transformation of the sector from 19th century design to one that can anticipate 21st century needs, and created first-of-a-kind approaches to solving engineering and customer issues. In recent years, she has served on both for-profit and not-for-profit boards of directors, holding positions of director, secretary, and chairman. She invested a significant portion of her volunteer time to IEEE and on a board for Appreciative Inquiry. Sherry has authored and co-authored over 35 papers, delivered international keynote addresses, and won the IEEE PES Excellence in Electric Power Distribution Award for contributions in electric power reliability. Welcome, Sherry. And thank you all for joining us today. I am honored to be surrounded by such tremendous accomplishments. And I recognize that with these accomplishments, they don't happen overnight. So I'd like to start with a question for all of you. I'd invite you to tell us a bit about your journey, including what made it unique and why you chose this industry. Who would like to begin?
You pick.
Becky, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
I'll be happy to. I've thought about this. I think how I got involved with this journey, I was probably born into it. The reason being, my father worked for an electric utility. So when I got out of high school, literally the next day, I was a student that was allowed to work, and I worked in the local part of the utility in Corpus Christi and learned a whole lot about different aspects of the utility. Then when I got out of college, like a lot of people, decided to stay in Austin. And with all of that utility experience, there was really kind of two choices: the Lower Colorado River Authority or the City of Austin, Austin Energy. Ultimately, long story short, I worked a few months with this LCRA, but at that time, being a woman, literally, you could only be a secretary. I still learned a lot about the organization, and then a few years later, after going to law school and becoming a water lawyer, environmental lawyer, I had an opportunity to go back to LCRA, the Lower Colorado River Authority, and it was really fortuitous. It was luck or some sort of a fate, because my expertise then was a lot of utility and a lot of water, and LCRA is a water and electric utility. And my 27-year career, second career at LCRA, I was asked to do something I had never done, but I had managed people before. So I was asked to manage set up an economic and financial planning. So that was sort of the beginning of doing a lot of different things and not really doing what I was ultimately trained for, not using my math background or my legal background, but doing things like financial planning, load forecasting, getting involved in regulatory. And I think one of the things that helped my journey and actually was helped me get to be the first female general manager was I wasn't afraid. In fact, I wanted to try different things. And that's so when I had done the economic and financial planning for a while, I said, can I do something different? I actually I applied to be an executive manager of transmission. And the comment was, well, how will you know how to talk to all those men? But then on sort of a consolation, they said, well, will you set up a regulatory and a regulatory in a broad sense, not just electric, but environmental. And so I set up a regulatory department. And at that time, the utility industry, as some people will recall, around 2000, was changing dramatically in Texas. The ERCOT we were going to a competitive market. So really the issues became something that was my forte over the last several years, the financial aspects of the electric utility. I knew where the money was. I knew how the money came in. I knew how the organization profited or didn't profit. So I then ultimately became an executive manager over a whole lot of things. I seemed to be the one that just got what nobody else maybe wanted. So I was over environmental affairs, customer service, regulatory, just a host of things. And I think my advice and what happened for me was I used to feel bad about not being a specialist at anything particular, but what happened to benefit me when it came time, and I made up my mind, I said, I'm going to apply for the general manager's job because I recognized I had the expertise, and certainly as much expertise as other general managers had. And that expertise was very valuable because I knew a lot about a lot of stuff, and being a specialist wasn't a detriment at all. And I guess my comment, which I've made to many women and including my own daughters, you don't have to be a specialist, but whatever you do, learn a lot about the industry you work in. The more you know, the more valuable you are, not only to yourself, but to the organization and to the industry. And this industry is remarkable because it's been changing now dramatically over the last 10 years, 20 years, and in different parts of the country, they're in different stages. So the more you understand that, the more valuable you are, because it's very much financially driven here in Texas, as anybody who's familiar with our recent ice storm can attest to. So that's my journey. I think it was largely being willing to take risk and want to do different things and not let myself get stuck in a silo. So that's my story.
That's great, Becky. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, Sherry, go ahead.
Becky, I just love your story, and it makes me want to start in a very similar place. That my dad worked for the power company for 30 years before, I graduated, and I had said, I don't want to work in power. It's so boring. Oh my gosh, how could I ever do that? It's so static. No, no, no. I want to fly the space shuttle. So I applied for an Air Force scholarship and got one, although not immediately, because the Air Force had entered me twice in their database and they killed me. So it turned out I was legally dead for 6 months and didn't know it. And so my friend who was a recruiter said, no, you got to go to college. You got to go. You're going to get this thing. And in October of that year, we learned I was not legally dead, which I knew. And I got my scholarship. So here I am. I'm all excited. I'm going to fly the space shuttle. And I was a poor college student. I ended up pulling my kneecaps out of track, training for marathons with crummy shoes. And so the Air Force, literally, I went in one Tuesday and I told them about a medication I'd taken, made me sick. The following Tuesday, they honorably discharged me in my junior year. And I didn't know what I was going to do, and I didn't know how I was going to pay for school, and it was crazy. But what ended up happening was GE is in the town where I live, and I got a job in the power group at GE. And all of a sudden, power wasn't so boring, and power had a lot of capability, and I got really intrigued by it. And the more I learned, the more I got excited about. And as Becky said, things have been changing like crazy. I'd say early 90s really started this whole big transformation. And I was kind of, tail end of the 80s, sort of a time frame. Ended up getting a job at a place called PTI, which did things nobody did before. So in my first summer, I fired rockets to attract lightning, striking a mock power system, and redesigning the way lightning protection worked in the industry. And it was extraordinary. And we built these things called PSS engines, which could be integrated into GIS systems, which, Unearth, they'll be knowing an awful lot about that. But in those days, they were just beginning. It was Small World and Esri, and that was it. And we were building these different things. And I got the opportunity to go around the world because I was in global consulting at the time. I just learned this tremendous amount. And I want to mention, as you go and you think about your career early on, try and do something and do it really deeply, because whatever that thing is will serve you for the rest of your career. I went on, did all kinds of consulting, helped out in lots of different ways, and then 9/11 came, and it was so hard to travel, and it was so hard to be a consultant. And National Grid had been saying to me for about a year, won't you come and join us? Won't you come and join us? And I'm thinking, oh, I don't want to work for utility, it's going to be so boring. Well, again, I couldn't have been wronger about that particular fact. And so I joined National Grid with 4 people reporting to me as a manager. And as time went on, you kind of heard where it went to. But having 2 years in London working for the CEO and learning just extraordinary things about not only our business, we were the 10th largest at the time, utility in the world, but really, as Becky said, about every aspect of the utility, and really beginning to understand things that, if I had just stayed in my engineering track, I would have never understood that broader context. And I couldn't agree with her more about that broad context being super important and being different in lots of places. So what you know in one place could be very transferable to another, because you may just be ahead of that curve. And then I came to a glass ceiling that was of my own creation. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that, I think, a little later in the program, which ultimately I came through. I've had an awful lot of fun working on boards. And if you don't know a lot about board work, I'm happy to answer some of those questions later. I've gotten to be an advisor for Unearth, which was an awful lot of fun. The company's doing really incredible things. And a number of the other companies that I ended up working for in the for-profit way, and really helping those companies grow. And I think, again, to Becky's point, what you learn in working in a big organization is that you actually know a lot about a lot of different things, because that's part of what you do each day. And I'll just finish up with, I was very, very active in IEEE as a volunteer. I highly recommend anybody getting involved in whatever thing calls your heart that's a volunteering activity, because you learn so much by giving to those organizations that those things truly help you in your career. And of course, for IEEE, it helped me with the publishing of papers, shifting in the industry, writing standards that hadn't been out there before for electric reliability to help all of the different utilities understand reliability on the same playing field and be able to choose where to spend their dollars to get the most bang for the buck. It's been wonderful. It's not over, and I look forward to sharing a bit more as we go through this.
Great. Thank you so much, Sherry. Tricia?
Hi, it's great to be on this panel. I'm really excited to hear just some of the input from everybody. I guess, my story is probably not quite as exciting as Becky and Sherry. When I graduated from college, I couldn't find a job in environmental science, which is what my degree was in. So I managed restaurants, I sold mutual funds. So I did a lot of other things, and halfway, a couple years into that, I knew that I still really had a passion for environmental science. And so I went back and I got my master's in environmental engineering from the Colorado School of Mines. And that's where my career in consulting took off. And I started in, working for some of the largest firms in the country. They'd have 20, 30,000 employees across the United States. And I really got to do a lot of different things because it was such a huge company. I was doing NEPA compliance, groundwater sampling, UST removals, and just getting to be out in the field a lot and get a deeper understanding of some of the work that was going on. And during that, I really found a passion for power and energy. I was excited by it. It was constantly changing. It's really dynamic. There's so many different pieces of it to understand. And I also started, and that's when I also learned demolition. I was on a job site. We were doing some remediation on it. We were going to help a company repower a plant here in Texas. And I remember walking around looking at this plant, and my boss at the time leaned back to me and he said, "I hope you're going to take good notes because you're going to run this project." And the next day I was running this $10 million demolition project with zero experience in demolition. But what it made me do is really dive into the project, understand it. I spent a lot of time with the guys in the field, understanding how asbestos abatement works, how their forklifts work, how the cranes worked. And so it really became an area of expertise for me. And there were very few women in there, and that had its advantages and disadvantages. Often some of the teams would talk about what was going on, assuming I didn't know what was going on, what they were talking about. So I could quickly correct actions that were going to happen. And so that made it kind of fun. And then in 2009, after working for a couple large firms, I decided to start ERP, Energy Renewal Partners. And so we are a consulting firm that's focused solely on the energy sector. So we do everything from initial prospecting and siting of power plants, primarily renewables, from a siting perspective, all the way through decommissioning of coal plants. We've helped our clients develop a little over 10 gigawatts of power, and it's just been really exciting to take this opportunity to mentor and bring people on. We're a smaller company, but I think the thing that I enjoy the most about this is really teaching my employees how to become good consultants and be a good fit for the clients that they're working with, understand what's important, understand where there's changes in the industry, how are we going to stay ahead of the curve, how are we going to point something out so that our client is getting a benefit before there's a mistake or before they've spent money in a project. And so it's been really exciting just to see, especially with some of the younger individuals that are coming in, they're excited about power, they're excited about energy, they want to know what they can do next in this industry. So I think that's probably one of the reasons that I just find this career so fulfilling. And so, hopefully we'll just keep growing and see more projects and keep changing with the markets.
I love that. Over to you, Robin.
Wow. I'm really honored to be here among all these really amazingly talented women. My story's a little different. I haven't achieved the higher levels, but I will say that I feel very accomplished just the same. I gravitated to civil engineering in college because I could see it and I could touch it. You know, gravity made sense, forces made sense, electrical not so much to me. And when I got out of college, I wanted to do environmental consulting, and had a hard time finding that work, and I eventually ended up in doing water and sewer and storm work. It was important to me to be involved in something that I got meaning for, and I felt like made a difference in my community. It's always been a driver for me to, you know, kind of make the world a better place. And sewer is not glamorous at all. It's not overly technical in a lot of ways, but without sewer, we don't have modern societies. You know, we need sewer to have cities. And so I got a lot of satisfaction knowing that I was making the communities that I lived in, the communities around me, healthier, safer places. I spent over 20 years as a consultant for municipalities and utilities on water and sewer and stormwater work. And about 6 years ago, I found my, you know, consulting with its ebbs and flows, and I found myself looking for a new opportunity. And Southern Company Gas was looking for people to, somebody to do sewer work. And I'm like, sewer work at the gas company? And as soon as I talked to the recruiter for the first time, it was like magic. I can't explain it. It was like, this is what I meant to be doing, is to be going out there, being, you know, having my foot both in the gas side, the energy side, and the sewer side, and where these two combined. And it's been a spectacular ride since then. And the passion that I never really saw in my career to be able to combine these things I've been working on for so long was such a fabulous opportunity. And I kind of, as the lone person who really understood sewer at a large gas company, I found myself kind of treating myself like I was an internal consultant. And so I came in and kind of revamped all the processes that we had around cross-bore prevention, cross-bore detection. All the contractors who had just had folks, you know, gas folks looking over their shoulder before were like, oh my goodness, you know what you're talking about. We added some different processes to things, we documented things, and it's really been the changes that we've made and that the industry really has made around cross-bores and safety have been really tremendous, and it's super exciting for me. And I am, like I said, I found this passion later in my career than I think I expected to, but it's been amazing, and I'm thrilled to be here to talk about it, to talk about my journey with all these amazingly distinguished other women on the panel.
Thank you so much, Robin, for sharing. Wow, 4 really, really distinct and different journeys, but all very impressive and very, very interesting. So thank you. And with, you know, each of your different journeys, I'm sure as well the challenges that you faced have also been distinct and different. So I'm wondering if you can all share maybe what did you find to be your biggest challenge during your journey? Becky, you can start us off again if you'd like.
Yes, and I just want to compliment Robin as a little note. When I first became an environmental water lawyer, I was assigned to go out for a week and visit every kind of sewage treatment plant. So I got to know and appreciate the science involved with that as well. And that actually served me well later on in life. I think the biggest challenge that I noticed over my career is people not appreciating the talent that people have. If you're, and especially for women, and I'm not complaining, but I noticed it. I once had to help what I called a baby female lawyer. I was already a sort of a senior person, and she was making an excellent point about something at LCRA, and nobody was really listening to her. They started talking about something, and I literally had to say, wait a minute, stop. Let's go back to what Lee just said. It's very important. So I saw that when I literally became the general manager. There were some people who, maybe some even of my new bosses, who weren't quite sure that I was up to the job, or if I was just going to be used in the job or whatever. And so you got to keep your self-confidence. But and then even when I started back at LCRA, I was asked, can you set up a financial planning department? Well, I had a math degree and a law degree. And one of my employees said, what do you know about business? What do you know about accounting? And I said, well, I wasn't hired to be the expert in that, but I was hired to set up a department and manage people. And I know how to do that. And I know how to do it well. So I think don't underestimate yourself, because people will underestimate you. And just don't be afraid to take risk. I think that's a big challenge that a lot of people have. They want to get comfortable, and women have a greater challenge because many are married, or they have children, or they have responsibilities that they've got to take care of, and they never lose that responsibility. So people underestimate their ability to contribute at 150%. So I think the biggest challenge was the having to have confidence in yourself, and get people to understand that you can do the job. And and again, that goes back to my earlier point, which I will always profess: learn everything you can about the company you work for and the industry you work in, because that builds confidence as well.
I couldn't agree more, Becky. Robin?
Mine ties in very nicely with Becky. My biggest challenge was my lack of confidence. I was working where I'd be the only woman in the room most of the time. I watched men that were less qualified than me be promoted over me. I would be working circles, doing everything I can, be very knowledgeable, but when it got time to let somebody go, I was that first person to go. And so it fed on, those inner scripts that we have of negativity. And I was afraid to stretch out there. And I think the reason for that lack of confidence, at least for me, was lack of female role models, lack of mentors that would reach out to me. I mean, men weren't really putting themselves out there for that, and lack of a support network. I know now that you need all of those things to really succeed, and to seek out those role models, men and women, and figure out what things they're doing for you. And it really did hold me back for a long time, not understanding that part of the process, is that you need to be able to build your own network. Nobody's going to do that for you.
Absolutely. Tricia?
Yeah, just kind of echoing a little bit of what Robin and Becky were talking about, but I think one of the things that I learned is just having that confidence to know that you're the expert in the room. Sometimes you might feel like you're the least experienced, or, everybody else in the room might know, maybe what's going on a little bit more, but that doesn't mean you actually don't know. And you might be the expert. And I think when I was doing demolition, that was one of the things. If I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of demolition experts, and I would be a little bit nervous about bringing up, I'm concerned about this safety risk, because did I really know that it was going to be a safety risk? Wouldn't they have thought of this if it was? And being, bold enough to just step in and stop the meeting, and make sure that we address the concerns. So having that confidence that your expertise is important and it's valuable. And I think, Robin, you touched on something there at the end, especially the other thing that I found really challenging is I think women networking we're just not as, we don't push the envelope, I guess, as much as I see a lot of our male counterparts doing, reaching out to each other and really, going out of the way to either help or push or get what you need out of other women. We tend to debate like, well, am I going to put this person out? Is it asking too much? And, really using that network that you've established, because I think we're all out there to build each other up. So I think that continues to be a challenge, is that as women, we need to do a better job of networking with each other.
I could not agree more. Sherry?
Yeah, so I'll share probably one of the hardest stories of my career, and I want to amplify. I agree with everything you guys have said, and I was just so blessed and lucky that when I was at National Grid, I had what turned out to be my best friend, another woman who was also a VP at that time. And so here we are marching through time, and our boss, the senior VP of network strategy, he's been there a bazillion years. He's going to be there another 15 years. So we think, great. And eventually somebody will get promoted. But, you know, I'm the heir apparent. I've got all the engineering. I'm hard charging. I'm delivering like there's no tomorrow. You know, it's just clearly that's going to be my job someday, right? Well, out of the blue, our boss gets fired and they appoint my best friend into the job. And I don't even get an interview. Well, this was like, talk about rocking back in your shoes and not really being able to know what was going on. And, you know, thankfully, because it was my friend, you know, she basically called me up that night and said, hey, come over and we got to talk and here's what's going down. And by the way, I'm getting you an executive coach. Was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And the first words out of the coach's mouth was, you're too smart and you have too much energy. Now, these are the things that had gotten me to where I was, right? This was like what I brought to the table were those two things. And I could not, for the life of me in the beginning, understand what she was talking about. And ultimately, Marie said, hey, you need to get a course at Harvard. Why don't you go do big data? And so I signed up for big data, you know, I'll have some executive education. And just before the course, they send out all the syllabus. And I looked at it and I'm like, I could teach this. So I called Harvard and said, look, I can teach this. And they said, well, we don't make exceptions, but, oh, okay, after talking to you, you can teach this. What do you want? I said, I want a course on authentic leadership. And so I took this course on authentic leadership, and there's 80 global leaders, and you live with 7 people in this dormitory type thing. And after 5 days, those 5 people could see exactly what my coach had told me. And it was like so frightening for me, right? Because how could this be? Like everybody knows this but me. But what it turned out was I brought so much energy into a room, and the way that I would bring it in, other people would get scared. And then they found it really difficult to be able to contribute at the right level. And so part of it for me was really learning about how do I now bring my skills to yet another level and be able to play in a different place. And if I hadn't worked through those issues, I would never have made senior vice president. So I'm going along thinking, I don't actually care if I get the job because now I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. I'm very present and all these things. And then out of the blue, I get promoted. So I guess the thing I really want to say is your strengths can be your weaknesses. And back to what Becky said a couple of times, learning about the whole kit and caboodle and making sure that you're strengthening up a lot of different skills. So even if you're great at something and it gets you somewhere, you really need the whole package if you want to really rise up into the senior leadership levels. At least that's what happened for me.
Amy, if I could just add one thing to what everybody's saying, but particularly Sherry, and I think we probably, a lot of women will experience this or have experienced it. I literally also got told by a female executive in my organization, and again, it's going to sound like strange advice, but maybe in a sense of at least appreciating it. She said, Becky, your problem is you get to the answer too quickly. You scare the men, and you know, kind of just slow down, and I sort of took it as be a little dumber if you can. But I process quickly, and that was a skill that I had. You know, I see patterns as you're, you know, and I think that's part of being strategic. But literally being told, just slow down and don't get to the answer so quickly because you frighten people. So what I would say to all of the people out there listening, men and women alike, is sometimes advice is not the best advice, but on the other hand, try to glean from it what you can. And like Sherry said, you know, I'm also probably more or was more intuitive, and so that sometimes people don't get that you're processing even though you're quiet. So
Yeah, thanks, Becky. Absolutely true. And just the second part of that was they had this coaching team come in for a group of us, and so we had to like take these pieces of paper and do this thing. And at the end, the coach said, "You think faster than anybody I've ever met. You have to slow down."
yeah.
And again, I just looking at this person like, I don't know. That was before I got the real sledgehammer, but anyway, it's interesting, isn't it? Right? So just be wise about your strengths and use them to your advantage, but then build up some of those other pieces too.
Love it. So switching gears a little bit towards the industry itself, I'm curious from all of you, what is the the biggest challenge you face right now in the industry, and how do you see that changing in the next 5 years?
Let me go first because I'll probably be quick because I'm, technically retired, though I do spend a lot of time in passion with the Association of Women in Energy because I basically think energy is where it's at. It powers the world. And I think the biggest challenge for this industry, especially in the United States, is the lack of understanding of just how really important it is. Maybe not so with some, but in every aspect of it. And so I think we have to be advocates for understanding the broad industry, whether it's the oil and gas or the renewables or transmission or generation. All of that stuff, it is now so integrated that it's unbelievable. And we've got to understand how it works and how it doesn't work. We recently had a mini conference, the Association of Women in Energy, with the state of Israel. They were very interested in our markets here, particularly the ERCOT. So I think the biggest challenge is getting other people to understand the industry, how it works, how important it is, and how interconnected it is. My 2 cents.
Can I
Tricia?
go? Oh, go
Oh.
ahead.
So, the thing that I would add on to that is I think one of the biggest challenges in our industry is that it is constantly evolving and changing. Every day there's some kind of new technology, whether we look at it from a renewable standpoint and bifacial panels or battery storage or clean coal, different types of natural gas. Every day it feels like we have a whole new technology and we're trying to advance so quickly. So I think it's a challenge to stay on top of some of the changes that are taking place. And the other part of that is then I feel like there's a lot of our industry that's become politicized. And so trying to work with politics into what feels like it should be a technical solution, I think is a consistent challenge that we've seen as well.
Go ahead, Sherry.
No, now I want to build on both of you. So I almost wish I'd gone last, but yeah, totally. And the decarbonization, it's not even only that there's all new technology, which is absolutely true, right? And storage, should we even be doing lithium ion? Yet it's the only thing that's on the market at the moment. But it's that we've been doing planning in a certain way. We've been building plants in a certain way. We've been thinking about load in a certain way. None of those things are true anymore. Right. And even if you look at COVID, where are people working out of their homes? A whole bunch of load moved out of the cities and out into the suburbs, right? We're putting in wind and solar. Well, we used to have to be 24/7 by 365. Well, the sun doesn't shine at night and the wind does blow at night, right? And so how are we even keeping track of this stuff? So it's even everybody who's ever worked in this industry has now got to fundamentally change. And we all know how humans love change, right? So I think that's a huge thing coming at us. But I wanted to piggyback on Becky for a second to answer actually something that may come up a little bit later is how do we get people interested in STEM and in our industry, et cetera? And it's just what you're talking about, Becky. How do we make it accessible? And Robin, when you said I like civil engineering because I could touch it and feel it, what if we all wrote articles for Good Housekeeping and Vogue and whatever else women are reading? What if we all started, there's new gaming out there now and women are entering the gaming space. What if they're writing games that have got more of our industry involved as a piece of what's happening? So, regular people are touching and feeling what it is we do. And one of the things we did at National Grid through grid modernization is we held this Appreciative Inquiry Summit. And we had 300 people come, low income, high income, middle income customers, customer advocates, the regulators, the legislators, universities. And one of the things those people said is, we want to touch green energy. We don't know what it is. So we built this house that was all full of green energy pieces and what our grid mod strategy was going to be. And people would come from the blue collar neighborhoods in particular and hang out at this place because they wanted to touch it. So how do we get that education out there? Because I had pipe that was laid when Lincoln was president, and I had stuff that Thomas Edison built himself, all the way up to what we put in yesterday, which is changing at the rate that Tricia spoke about. We got to start talking about it with everybody on the planet.
So the challenge I see, and it piggybacks on all of this, is finding people and finding the right people for the job And because they don't understand what all these energy concepts are or what goes into it, I mean, it's like, just as the example of working in sewer, everybody's initial reaction is, ew, gross. But when you realize it's a building block, it changes people's perspective. But one of the things, I think it's hard to attract people, so we need to hold on to the people we've got. And I think we need to be sure that, historically women went, and 40% of my class in school and college for engineering was women, and only a handful of those women are left. We don't keep women in these technical roles because they have been getting these messages that when they start a family, that they're no longer committed, that they aren't able to take on these leadership roles. I mean, how many times have you heard that, oh, we can't give that to so-and-so, she just had a baby? That's ridiculous. So we need to be able to keep these women engaged at these periods in their life when they're starting their families. We need to keep them on board, and we need to use the lessons of COVID. Your work does not have to happen in an office building between 9 and 5. It can happen anywhere, anytime. So we have to keep, not only attract new people, but keep the women and the other folks that we have we've invested in, keep them in the game.
I love that, Robin. Are there other folks on the panel who also have some ideas on how we can get more women and other individuals into STEM or keep them in?
Well, Amy, I want to play off. I want to kind of follow up on one thing Sherry said, because in what I was saying earlier, we've got to help people understand the industry and some of the component parts, and it's a matter of getting people to understand it. And I once was at a group, it was sort of like an advisory deal for nuclear power, and they were saying, how can we get more people to understand the need for nuclear? And I said, well, part of it is you've got to dispel all the myths about it, and you've got to dispel and I said, why don't you go out and make sure you're addressing a lot of women or people, mothers or whatever, and show that it's not the boogeyman. A lot of us grew up when people were building bomb shelters. That's people's perception. Well, people's perception of energy is somewhat outdated even today. They still think I plug something in and it happens and I don't care about where it came from. Well, you better care about it, because it's, as we've all said, this industry is changing rapidly. And I think about, one thing that hit me again, back when I was in my executive MBA, I had to write a paper. Well, that was in 1990. And I wrote how distributed technology or fuel cells were going to change the whole nature of the utility industry. Now, I was just maybe a couple of decades ahead of, but at least thinking about it. But again, it's not so much getting people into STEM as getting people to understand how the world operates. How does energy power the world? Take away their cell phone. Be in an ice storm where you can't charge it up. They'll start to appreciate it, I'm telling you. So.
That goes along with, buy an electric vehicle and we'll be 100% green. And the fuel mix of what's actually powering up that electric vehicle's got an awful lot of coal in it. So.
One thing that I found to be really beneficial is just, if you stay in contact with your local schools, they're often doing these career fairs and, different things at, grade school, middle school, and high school level, and being able to go in there and be a female in the energy sector, an engineer, and talking about, really the excitement of this career. I think, I've had so many people reach out after that and talk about how it's changed kind of their perspective, or that they're excited to maybe get into this, because a lot of people just don't realize the opportunities and just the breadth of different ways that you can be involved in the energy sector. And so I think going in and talking to, getting involved with the schools and talking with these young kids about it and get them excited to learn about what they're doing, I think makes a huge difference as well.
Great. Any other thoughts on that? Otherwise, I will move to an audience question.
Just one really quick one, which is totally. So there was this time when I had an opportunity to speak to the 7th graders. And then the next week I spoke on Wall Street. Anybody want to guess who had the more insightful and more hopeful and optimistic view of the world? I mean, the 7th graders were amazing. They wanted solar on their backpacks and they were like so keen on into it, and they were just going to make it happen. So that's such a great point, Tricia.
And I'm sorry, I would add one more thing in this, and it's just, you know, not only do we need to be promoting our daughters in STEM, but really, you know, I put as much focus on getting my son to be aware of the differences that are going on. And, you know, I really feel like as, you know, he's heading off to college next year, he would probably be more apt to, if he was in a leadership position, to hire and trust a female, because he's seen it as a role model and he knows how important it is, and he's surrounded by strong and confident women. So I think it's important that we not only focus on the success of our daughters, and I want my daughter to be highly successful, but I want my son to understand why it's his role to help make that happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I know personally for me, I've had a lot of champions and mentors in my life who have been male, and that focusing solely on females, bringing females up, isn't enough to solve the problem. We also have to be training our younger males and all of them all the way up to be able to support. Quick audience question. Can the panel suggest any reading material on the concept of getting to the answer slowly? Here, Sharon.
Getting to the, since I brought that up, get to the answer slowly. I think it's more, you know, Sherry said something, and I certainly would recommend executive coaching or some coaching. You know, maybe that ought to be sort of a management training issue. But I don't think that people should necessarily get to the answer more slowly, because that's part of their DNA. It's teaching the broader audience that let's make sure we're listening in meetings to everybody, because I literally, early on in my career, and I'm probably older than a lot, I would be in a meeting with some senior people, and they were so busy thinking of how they could respond to impress the general manager, they really weren't listening to anything else that people were saying, or even to him. So I think maybe listening in meeting, and listening to other people, and listening to people that you don't necessarily know where they're coming from. So I think what I would recommend is that people take advantage of that kind of coaching and management training and people training of listening.
You know, there's a great book, it's called Theory U, and it's about listening, and it's about the different levels of listening, which is why it's a U. And so a lot of people are just listening on a transactional level. She said this, I do that, right? But as you start coming down into the deeper levels of listening is where you really get that true communication. It's a great book if people are looking for books. And I'll just show you this one too, which was one of the ones that I read for that Harvard course, which was by Bill George, Finding Your True North. And this is actually a workbook. And for me, it really helped to kind of go through this for my own mentoring and of myself, I guess, and my executive education. But if you do something like this, you'll start finding out some things about yourself in a way that you can now use them to your advantage instead of having them be a problem in the workplace.
Perfect. Another question from the audience. Digitization is changing industries. What are the key digital trends transforming the energy sector?
If nobody wants that, I'll take it, but somebody else want it?
Go for it, Sherry.
Oh my goodness, it's so exciting. I can't begin to tell you. And, you know, Amy, I guess I'll just say that, you know, Amy and I had a number of different discussions along with Nate, another one of the founders at Unearth, about this digital transformation and what's happening. And yeah, there has been GIS around for a very long time, but really unlocking the full potential of GIS is one of the things that Unearth is working on now, along with a number of other folks. And being able to literally take every bit of information that's out there, fuse it together to allow us insight into things that we never had a view of before. that now allows us to model and invest those dollars in a whole lot better way. It's like Becky was talking about, in it, just if you're reading the newspapers recently, right, the new infrastructure plan that's out there, there's $406 billion coming into energy. Well, how are we going to spend that money most effectively for society as we go forward? Part of it's through this digitization and through the actual ability to model and fuse that data. So I would say that's one way that it's happening. And getting our line forces, our field forces, to be comfortable with moving from, no, I hammer things, I climb things, to I have to actually enter stuff in, has been a big part of the journey. And so, you know, all the models that we built at National Grid had to come with a change management program. So even in our digitization of today, it's all about the change management to make it move forward. But it's very exciting, and there's just a ton of info out there, even from security cameras on an ATM that can actually help your power system. So.
Well, and I think one thing to follow on to that, it does go to kind of, you know, my mission is that trying to get women that work in the industry, no matter which facet of it they work in, there's so many, to not silo themselves. And that even includes the technology. You know, traditionally IT is in one thing and maybe the cyber is in another, but those technologies are driving a lot of the aspects and the costs of this industry. So maybe we need to encourage women that are in leadership positions, whether you're C-suite or you're managers, to again get out of your silo or help others understand your aspect of the company. What do you bring to that? And I mean, I'm sure with Tricia, I mean, she has her own company, so she's got to be like, that company's got to be a jack of all trades. So maybe it's a little bit easier in a smaller company, but in larger ones, boy, everybody just they get in their little niche and they're afraid to get out of it, but they need to. And I think that would help people understand more about just how much this industry has changed. And it's very financial as well.
And I think one of those ways that you can get out of those silos, and I want to make sure that I have a chance to put in a plug for whether it's employee resource groups or professional networks, get out of that silo you sit in. You know, you can be the best engineer, but if nobody knows what you're doing and you don't have an understanding of what else is going on, you're not going to get to that next level. Many large companies are going to employee resource groups, which are kind of in-house professional networks, whether they're women's groups or minority or Asian Pacific Islander groups. It's a great way to meet other people in your organization who do different things that you can learn from. And then there's organizations like WEN and AWE and even SWE or any of the, you know, ASE, any of those. Meet other people who are doing other things. The more you know, the more value you are, and the more opportunities you have to demonstrate what you know and your leadership qualities.
And I would just say it's not necessarily a plug for AWE, but I've been amazed how many companies now are approaching our organization to utilize our website to post jobs. There are a lot of opportunities, and I'm not encouraging people to leave their own companies, but I think it highlights that they are looking wherever they can find, you know, some talent, and that you don't have to be 100% qualified in your mind to do a job. I've told both of my two daughters, who are very talented, very professional in different fields, one in solar, one in medicine. You know, your resume should highlight what some of your experiences have been, but you don't have to be, if you see a job posting, doesn't mean that you have to be able to do everything that it says. And I think that's the mistake that women make much more than men. Men will, if they're 30% qualified, they'll go for it. Women think they've got to be 95 to 100. So, and you don't. So.
I second that, Becky, and I just want to pick up on Robin's point about the in-company networks. Another great thing is often they're sponsored by senior people, and now those senior people get a look at you, and all of a sudden you may end up with a mentor that you didn't even know you could have. And mentors have played a huge role in my life. So yeah, those things work tremendously well.
Any other advice for folks out in the audience?
I'm going to pick up from what Sherry said about mentors. And to me, that word has so much baggage. And the idea as a young engineer of reaching out to somebody and saying, can I take a few minutes of your time? I wasn't comfortable with that at all. And I think the way I like to think about it and the way I would phrase it is it's kind of like intentional networking or intentional relationship building. Don't think it has to be this formal thing where, you know, it can be as much as just building that relationship with that senior person, and getting to know them and them getting to know you. There doesn't have to be a big ask with that or a big time commitment, but be intentional with it and look at those folks that you see they're doing something that you like and try to reach out and get to know them. It doesn't have to fit in a, you know, I always think of these mentoring programs as being formal and constructed, and it doesn't have to be that way. So, you know, get out there and meet people, ask them questions.
And I want to add one thing, Amy. I would challenge, I don't know who our audience is necessarily, but I would challenge all of the women, even here, but if you manage people, get to know. I mean, I remember one time setting up a new department. I met with every single person that worked with me and wanted them to tell me about their backgrounds. And I was shocked what I learned about the talents they had that we didn't know. And so it's incumbent upon you in an organization, if you're in a management level, senior or not, get to know the people that work for you, find out their backgrounds, find out the things that they've done, and you might find you've got a lot more talent than you ever dreamed of. And so I think that's an important from the mentoring standpoint.
It's funny, when I was starting, we didn't have mentoring programs. We had what you described, and those are the ones that worked, and those check the box mentors never ever worked, right? I guess
Yeah.
my one last thing would be find balance in your life. It's so easy to get way overcommitted on your work part of your life and not have the rest of your life. And so play as hard as you work, whatever feeds you, make sure you're being fed by it. You will be a much better person in your life for it, and your company will thank you for it in the end.
Great, thank you. Well, we have 2 minutes left, so I'll go ahead and give a big, huge round of applause and thank you to Becky, Robin, Tricia, and Sherry. It was so great to have you today. I feel like I learned so much inspirational stories and experiences. My personal takeaway is that there are so many different unique paths to success, but if you embrace your authentic self and find the path that works best for you, that is a sure path to success in and of itself. So thank you so much. Join us again on April 29th as we host a fireside chat with Danielle Murfeld, Vice President and Chief Technology Officer at GE Renewable Energy. Also, don't forget to check out the association and companies represented here today, the Association of Women in Energy, Energy Renewal Partners, and Southern Company Gas. Thank you and have a great rest of your day or evening.
Thanks, everybody. It was great being on the panel with you.
Definitely.
So we take ourselves out?
I think we have to.
All right. All I have to do is figure out how.